certainly links together the attacks on poor folks generally. It's what leads politicians who are seeking high office to actually say with no sense of shame or irony that there's roughly half of the American population that just don't want to work. They are takers and not makers, and thus we ought not really concern ourselves with them. It's the mentality of disposability at work there that says these people fundamentally don't count like you and me. It's the mentality that allows us to incarcerate 2.25 to 2.5 million individuals disproportionately for nonviolent offenses, not really caring about if or when or how they might be rehabilitated for whatever criminal act they are in fact guilty of, and doesn't really care if those persons of color with regard to the war on drugs are disposed of in this way at rates that are 5 to 9 times higher than those for white folks. It's the mentality of disposability that allows us to construct a school system that is profoundly unequal and quite deliberately so. And I know it's hard for us to hear that because we like to think that when inequality besets our society that it's just because we don't quite understand how to get to equality. You know, we're trying, but we just haven't quite figured out the trick. And yet really that's not true with regard to schools. Our inequality in our school system is quite deliberate. We know that. How? Because we brag about it. We brag about the fact that we have thousands of school districts all doing their own thing, right? Because God forbid we wouldn't want to have big government involved in education. We don't want big government controlling the schools. We don't want big government setting national standards. We don't want big government requiring a certain degree of similarity in teacher training. We don't want big government requiring equitable distribution of financial resources. So we rely on property taxes, right, for most of the funding that goes into our schools around the country, even though we know by definition that will result in unequal educational resources. So we have unequal resources, unequal teacher training, unequal and unstandardized curriculum, and then at the end of the 12 years, we give all the kids a standardized test. After we've given them 12 years of unstandardized education, and we call that fairness, but we can only do that because we have at some point decided that the ones who fall through the cracks, the ones whom we leave behind in spite of our fancy language that we use in our education bills that say we won't leave any children behind, we know that ultimately what we're saying is they don't count. If they don't make it, that's all right, because someone has to do the really hard work that the rest of us think we're too good for, right? Somebody has to clean the bedpans at the hospital. Somebody has to pick up the garbage on Wednesdays in my neighborhood. Somebody has to change the sheets at the Westin where I stayed last night. And if everybody goes to college, who's going to do that? You see, if everybody goes to college, those people might think that they're above that kind of work because those of us with degrees, we've decided we are, right? Like, I don't even know how to, and think about how absurd it is, because the people that pick up my garbage every Wednesday, the 3 guys that do that, right, the work that they perform is far more valuable than the work that the pharmaceutical sales rep 2 doors down who hawks Viagra, right? The guys that pick up the garbage are performing a much more important social purpose. I'm not saying there might not be a social purpose to both. I'm just saying, right, that the guys that pick up the garbage ultimately are the ones, like if they don't show up for 5 weeks, we have bubonic plague on my block. Like, people start falling out dead, right? Because I wouldn't know where to take my garbage. I don't know where the dump is. I don't know where the recycle facility is. So if those guys go on strike, my community is completely screwed, right? That they get paid about $21,000 a year. The sales rep down the block makes high 6 figures, right? If he doesn't show up for 5 weeks, life will go on, right? Somebody else will sell the drugs that he sells. Folks will continue to take the drugs that he sells, and everyone will go about their business. It won't have the same effect, but he makes far more money. So it isn't about social utility. It's just about the fact that we have an economy predicated on inequality, so we create a school system that recreates that says some will be here and some will be there, and to some extent, that's the system that we have had for a very long time and that we still have. All of it, I think, just like ecological and environmental destruction, predicated on the idea that some simply don't count as much as others.